Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today, part 2 of my Minimal Techno Ableton template explanation. So last week we talked about sound design and composition, and this week we're gonna talk more about the arrangement, variation, mixing and mastering. So this template has been made during my live stream session where I create track from scratch. So you can actually find out how I create this track. I'll put it in the description to the second channel where you can go and check it out. I do live stream every 2 Sundays on this channel. But yeah, let's get started. Let's have a quick listen of the track and then we jump into it. Alright, so let's talk about the arrangement first, more like as an overall, and then I will go more in detail. So you can see it's kind of following a classic intro with kind of a pre-chorus here. Then you have the chorus, then you have your verse, then you have your break with second chorus and then second verse, and then the final break and kind of a bridge because it's not really the outro, it's still like a lot of stuff happening, and then the outro. So let's listen from the beginning and I will talk about each element. Alright, so let's start with the intro. You have your kick, hats, you have both of you plucky bass and the drone high playing, and you can see here on the mixdown I have a look at. So all my tracks are going through the mixdown. They are kind of my master effects, so I have a look at and some delay reverb effect here. So it goes like this for 16 bar. Then you have some SFX noise and the transition. And then you have the synth start to play. I remove the locket obviously. I add the snare. Some synth here and there. So here you can, there is not really a big break here. I wanted something a bit more continuous. And so what's happening here, I had more hats and I also add the drone loop. And the thing what was happening as well until now, you have your filter of your main bass element, watch opening progressively. So now here we already enter in the track. So I've done a lookout with some SFX, and then after when the sound drop, you have this kind of synth just right before the drop during the break, this kind of high-pitched synth. This is kind of to say to the listener, hey listen, there is some changement about to come, this and the lookout. It's obviously a great way to say to the listener, okay, things are about to change. And then when you drop the sound, I have a new synth coming, and that's how we enter in the chorus. So extra I had to have a bit more groove. And then during the whole chorus is just, you have the same two but playing with different modulation. You can hear how I modulate the unison. This was kind of normal, and you're gonna hear how much excitement it had to have this variation here. And then you have each synth playing one after the other, kind of answering to each other. So you see, I try to, like, every 4 bars to have something new, So you have here, you have nothing until here, then you have 4-bar. Here you have sometimes this low horn sound, but which kind of play in the continuity of the first one. And then you have nothing, and then 4-bar after, you have this one playing, and then nothing. And you see every 4-bar there is a new sound coming, and so I does that. And then just before the end of the chorus, I have this synth as well, which gonna appear. Some SFX. So here the idea for the verse was to have a little bit more this bass high movement sound, a bit more in the front. Here on the chorus the main element was more like you had your bass, it was there but a bit more in the background, and the focus was more on the synth, rather than here is the opposite, is a bit less synth. You still have some obviously to add variation, but a bit more or less, and you can hear better the variation of your synth here as well. So that's what the idea. I remove all of the drum. And you have this synth as well, who wasn't really playing in the chorus. I mean, it just played at the end of the chorus, and which is now playing. Here you can see there is some of the synth as well. I have some variation. This is like straight, and this you have a kind of a pitch variation. Alright, so then we add some drums. So you will notice one thing. The thing as what happened with the bass high, I record, I think was 8-bar or 4-bar live with the push, and then I kind of loop everything. But the thing is, when you add some of the synth after, sometimes when the synth is playing, I was opening the cutoff, and you have some kind of frequency clashing, and you have both synth clashing at the same time. So I keep the same modulation, but you can see sometimes when the synth was playing, I kind of shut down and cut the modulation in order to leave space for the synth, because sometimes, for example, here I had another kind of variation here. So but the problem is that when it's playing the same time than this synth, it's kind of messing. It's like everything playing in the same time, rather than if I bring down everything, I leave space. I cut down the cutoff of my bass high, and I leave space for the synth 3. And which makes things a bit more clearer. And then after I can go back with my crazy modulation. And then we go into the break. Alright, so a couple of things happening here. First, you can see I start with the low cut, and I still have my kick playing for 4-bar, and then I remove it. This just kind of helped with the transition, rather than if you remove everything in the same time, it can be a bit abrupt. And other than that, I kind of keep everything for this breakdown, and I add a clap roll. So you can see here I play with the velocity, so it's getting higher and higher. It's classic liking. Basically what it does is your clap is getting louder and louder, and it increases the tension, the intensity, so it helps with the build up. You can hear your bass high. It starts with the filter low, and you open more and more. Again, bring the tension, help to having this rising effect. Now other things, I have noise as well. I talk about it next week, and I have this sweeping automation which bring the tension, and I have as well this Sense SFX. Basically the modulation is you have a LFO, a very slow LFO, which is modulating the pitch and the warp of your oscillator, and what it does, it's like basically bring tension as well, because you have these things keep rising and rising, and all together. I also have this noise FX on top, just at the end. And then what's happened, I cut everything 2 bars before the drop, and I play this scent. But I play, instead of playing at the low note, I play high note. And what I do here to bring even more tension, I start with the filter down, and then I open the filter, it goes. It's just add a bit of movement and dynamic, because you start low and finish high, and you have this movement as well. And then here I've done something, I've cut down the volume just to have a very quiet moment just before the drop. It's just to have a nice dynamic before you drop. So obviously the lower you get before you sounds drop, it creates more impact because you have a higher dynamic. So yeah, it grows. So here again we drop with the synth, we don't have drum, we have this synth playing. And you can see I shut down the filter here of my moving bass high. So this way we can hear this one. I have this kind of synth horn as well effect, which helps with the drop, and I have the noise as well, which is kind of... Alright, so that's for the drop, and then we start our second chorus. You can see I'm gonna add some drums progressively, and still here, same, I have the synth playing up and there. You can see now I have added this synth 7 as well, playing once in the high, and the same but an octave down, just add some variation. Like, because you have the same synth playing it over and over, it can quickly become boring, so you need to add some fresh. You can see here you need to add some kind of fresh element or fresh variation. You can see here with the synth 4, I had some pitch modulation to make it change from one to another, but I also play it now a higher pitch, and basically this kind of low synth horn growling effect. I have just synth 4 at the beginning, and I decided to create another one just to add variation, which kind of sound different but similar. And initially all of these synth, they were basically on the synth 4, but you can see it was kind of playing too often, so I decided to create a new type of synth horn, and I bring down some of the synth playing, so this way it's kind of adding variation. And yeah, that's how we go into our drop to chorus. So you can hear what's happened here. You can see here the modulation is, the pattern of the modulation is the same, but it's way much higher. If you check the frequency, like the lower it's around 90 Hz, rather than here usually the lower you can see is around 20. And basically what I've done is I've just selected the whole, and you can basically decide to go down, the whole modulation go down, or the whole modulation go up. But yeah, that's what basically I've done. And so this way I have this part, the bass is a bit more open than in the previous one. And yeah. here it's something interesting happening. I think this happened, I don't remember exactly, I need to check in the live stream, but here what I've done, I probably took this one and I said, okay, instead of having the same, I'm gonna try to pitch it down, and I think by mistake or by accident I kind of loop it, and you can see basically this is like, it's basically this clip but that I have shortened, and then that I have duplicate, and it basically creates a nice effect, and I say, oh, okay, actually I could use that for a second verse. So originally the synth was like this. Imagine if I take this one and I pitch it down, but then I loop it. You get this, and that's exactly what I've done here. And it was sounding good overall, so I kind of kept it. So here just the kick and the snare are playing, and I still have my other synth playing here. I add the hats. So you can hear when I have a short look at here, and then what I do is I play again the long version of the synth, a bit less looped. You can see how my bass high is to cut off very down, so we focus more on this synth now. Basically this has kind of became one of the main elements on the second part of the track. This one is already rising. Alright, and then the final break is pretty similar to the first one, except that I get rid of all of the drums straight away. I have the clap roll, same, I have the opening filter of the bass high, and then I have some noise and synth SFX coming up exactly the same way basically than the first break. The only thing is, here you can see the noise and the synth SFX are kind of keep going after the break. So everything rises, but then instead of stopping the sound here, I leave it go down. So for the noise it's stripped down, and for the synth SFX basically is you have your LFO which is gonna raise, and then after it's going down, and that's what's happening. And because like this after it's like the final break, and it's not really the outro because there is still a lot of elements. You can see the bass is gonna play the movement, and I still have a lot of couple of synth playing. So then after I have this kind of bridge. Still have all of my hats, snare. Get rid of the hats, slowly get rid of the drum element. I almost don't play anymore the synth shot now. And that's basically our outro. Remove the snare. And I bring down the filter. And then I just have the hats here, and then I get rid of everything. Alright. Alright, and that was the main global arrangement idea. So in terms of automation, I show you more or less everything already, how I was doing with the SFX, how I was automating some parameter with the scent to add variation, with the bass high. Obviously the modulation here is actually what gives the groove, so it's very important. Now one modulation I didn't talk is the things happening on the mixdown. I have this riser effect, which is a rack I've made. It's basically just like delay and reverb, kind of bringing the build up, building the tension. See, if I put on the extreme, it's a lot of delay and reverb with a low cut as well. I'll put the link in the description. If you want to grab the rack, you can grab it for free as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it. After I just have like the gain that I show for the break to lower the volume to have a bigger dynamic. And then this is the low cut I use sometimes. And yeah, that's pretty much it about automation variation. Now let's talk about mixing. If you see like this video, you know, I talk a lot about being very surgical, and that's with this kind of track, you don't have that many elements, but you need to have them very clear, very precise. And one thing I talked about last week, and I used a lot, it was the drum bass. And it's something I use for several reasons. First, like for example on the hats, I have different hats and I use the compressor to kind of glue everything. It can add a bit of body sometimes as well. Then I will have drive. I have different algorithms or medium where I can add a bit of drive. This will depend on the element, but it adds a bit of color and different and a bit of loudness. And then you can add some crunch as well, which is add a different tone, accentuate some frequency, so add some harmonic in a certain way. Then I will use transient. Transient, it's like a gate. So for example, when I have here a long reverb, you can hear how it reduces the tail of the reverb, which is great because you still have the feeling of having your hats in the very wide room, but without having this long tail. You get both of both worlds. And yeah, so I use that on a lot of elements. You can see here for the hats, I didn't have that much process. Two claws I had playing, there is absolutely no processing. There's just going through reverb, a reverb return. And after I just have this drum bass. The kick is not really mixing, it's more like sound design, how I wanted the kick. One thing I talked about last week, it's how the drum bass. So if you listen in solo, I kind of prefer the kick without the drum bass, but then within the track it adds a bit of more body and it sounds better actually with the drum bass. So let's have a listen without the drum bass. You can hear how it doesn't change that much the tone of your kick, but it adds way much more body, much more presence in your kick. So that's a cool thing. Then it's just the EQ, it was more sound design than mixing really. Where I reduce here for the muddiness and I cut the low quite tight, but this is more sound design than mixing really. It's not really like because I wanted to remove the low. It's just because when you do that, you can get a bit more tighter, I would say. But yeah, then it's always, you will see with my video in general, I always use the same process when I mix. I will use EQ to reduce the frequency, add saturation to add harmonics and loudness. And then I will add sometimes delay to add a bit of groove and a bit of reverb. But then again, there is no really, for example, the reverb, it depends if you want to put your sound in a small space. Maybe you have a shorter decay. If you want to put it in a longer space, in a wider space, you will have a longer decay. And then here again, I have these drum bass things that I've added. And you can see I just add some saturation, reverb. Here I use the gate drum. It's basically the same than the transient in the drum bass. So basically you have your reverb. Here a long tail, but if you want something sharp, you can see here how it's removing a little bit of the tail of your reverb. You see like the dark one is what has been cut. EQ, reverb. Here I have some sidechain compression, EQ. Yes, I wanted to talk about that, about the low end. Because I went for a more tight low end rather than usually I will go for a more subby. And here you can see, even though it's the bass line, I cut at 50 Hz, which is quite a lot. I cut a lot of bass. You see almost all of this subby frequency, I kind of cut it, which can sound weird. And here is the same. It's less obvious, but And the reason why I've done that, it's because if I remove, okay, let's play like it is by default, like it is normal. So I like because you have a tight low end. And if I remove my low cut so that I let my bass pass, so your track suddenly get way much more heavier, which what you might want in some case, or you might prefer than now. But for this track, I didn't want it. I wanted to keep something tight and not too bassy, subby. So that's why I have this heavy cut on the bass. And same goes with the kick. Like usually if you do that, is when you want a tighter kick, because otherwise you get a bit more of the subbiness in the kick. So yeah, then after it's just some sidechain, putting the bass in mono, and for the bass high, I just had a bit of reverb, put the bass in mono, and then EQ, I boost the high because obviously it's a bass synth, but it acts like a synthesizer, like more like in the mid-high. So that's why I boost. Then I have my drone, nothing crazy. In terms of mix, all of the decisions are more like sound design related, so I explained them next week. I explained them last week. What I've done for most of the synth, I kind of get rid of all of the low frequency because I already have 4 elements in the low end. And like I said, I wanted to keep a low end clear, tight, and very precise, so I don't want it to have too much low end for my synth, so I kind of cut and boost the high always, most of the time. Always use drum bus, so you can see here you can see how Crunch add some colors and how it worked well for this specific sense, so I kind of added a little bit more than usual. And again, the size of the reverb, it really depends what you want to achieve, if you want a big space or no. So for example, for the descent, I use a not too long decay, but with the transient I reduce even that. But for example, for the Sense 6, you can hear I have a longer decay, and because I want my sound to last a little bit more. So I've done that as well because it kind of creates contrast, because most of my synth and my sound, I will have this drum bus with these gates, so you get a lot of sharper sound, which is great, that's what I want. But adding 1 or 2 elements with a longer tail, longer reverb, gonna add a bit of contrast as well, so that can be interesting. And I've done it as well. You can hear how the reverb is lasting longer. Yeah, that was globally the idea of how I set my reverb for this track. One tip I can give you for the reverb, usually I try to EQ as well, so I get rid of the very high frequency, because usually these are the noisy one and they kind of get things messy, like you have less definition in your sound because everything become very noisy and kind of blurred. But yeah, then like I said, EQ, saturation, reverb, that's what I always do. Then again, why I EQ like this is just like I cut the low frequency I don't need until the point I like. I boost some frequency, I think, enhance the scent. I cut the one here, was too much high. There is no rule, this is case by case and it's what you're after. These EQ are more like sound design EQ rather than really mixing. I've done this EQ before the mixing. I don't really even mix. If you're familiar with my video, you know that I like to mix as I produce. I always make sure that each new sound I'm adding already fit perfectly the mix and doesn't mess up with my mix. So like this, when my track is finished, I already have a very clean mix. All right, and then so you might wonder, why do I have this Mixdown track? Basically for 2 reasons. First, I like to keep my things clear, and I like to have some SFX on my master. So like effect that affect the overall mix, for example the low cut, and for the riser effect like this delay reverb effect. And basically this effect I could put them on the master, right? But the thing is, on the master I have my mastering chain, and I don't want to mix effects that are related to kind of SFX, like to the sound design part, with effects that are related to the mastering. Plus I feel like the master should be always empty, or just put like your mastering chain, but that's it. Everything which is kind of sound design related that affect the composition of your track should be on a separate track. So what I'm doing is basically I just create a track with no input but with the monitoring in, and what I'm doing is I'm sending all of my track here. You can see they are all sent to this Mixdown, so this way they all go through this Mixdown track, and then therefore they are all affected by this effect chain. And then after this is going to the master where there is my mastering chain. Speaking of mastering, I'm just gonna show you quickly how I've made it. So mastering, I always recommend someone someone else to do your master, but it's always good to know a little bit how it works. For example, if you finish a track, you want to try it on the sound system. It's great to have a bit of knowledge. So this is what I like to call a homemade mastering. It's just like usually to make sure your low frequency are in mono, adding a bit of stereo, rebalancing a little bit with an EQ your sound, adding a bit of compression to glue, adding some saturation to add some extra harmonic, and then finally having some limiter to squash a little bit, make things louder. So I'm gonna pick up this part. So the first is utility, put the bass in mono, add a bit of stereo, not that much. The EQ just cut everything under 30 Hz to avoid to have this very subby low frequency. So here even, I usually do that for any track, but even here it's even more because like I said, I wanted a tight low end and not too subby. So that's perfect for that. Then you have, just to add a bit, remove the muddiness. And I just put a 3 kHz and I cut everything above 18 kHz because nobody is necessary. So then I'm gonna do some glue compression with a bit of soft clipping. Here the trick is because basically as it's a master effect, what's gonna happen is your kick drum is gonna trigger your compressor and you don't want that. You want to have more glue effect. You don't want to tame the transient of your kick. So you use the EQ so this way the input signal is filtered and your kick is not really triggering your compressor because the low end it's very high in energy. So that's what's gonna trigger first your compressor. You don't want that. You wanna compress more like the signal as a whole. So I will usually put the attack, it really depends, 30 milliseconds, 10 milliseconds, the release at halfway through and the ratio at 4. And then what I will do is I will go down. Usually I try to don't go above 5 and because otherwise you got too big pumping effect, but I try to stay around 3 dB. But yeah, it really depends. And then I will compensate the gain. So the cool thing with this compressor, you can go a little bit more if you activate the soft clip. Nice soft clipping distortion. I've been gentle, I could have been a bit more with the makeup gain, but yeah, I feel like this. Saturation is just to add extra harmonics. You can see it's like a few dB and a very small dry wet amount. Then I have a mid-side EQ. It's just to enhance the stereo really. You can see the mid is nothing and the side, bit of boost. I don't know, it helps as well sound to be more focused. And then I have color limiter, which is just gonna limit a little bit, but it's more like for the coloration. You see here you have some saturation and I really like how it adds. Again, enhance the sound, make it a bit louder. And then a limiter just to make things louder. I might have been able to, if you want to gain in loudest, you can use a bit more makeup gain, but it was fine like this. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the mastering. And yeah, that's pretty much it for today's guy. I hope you like this video. You can grab the template, I will put it in the description. And see you soon guys, bye bye.